Hey everybody, this is Josh Mendoza, and today we're going to be discussing hotel liability for guest property and its evolution from common law to today's standards. So, common law, as stated by our King Arthur from Monty Python, uh, an innkeeper is responsible for the safekeeping of property committed to his custody by a guest. Basically, a innkeeper is liable for a properly accepted guest's property except for fraud of the guest, an act of God, or the public enemy. So, if there's a fire, if there's a flood, a strike of lightning, the innkeeper is not liable to replace those things of their guest. They are not liable to the guest trying to cheat them, and they are not liable to the public enemy. Now, going from common law back in early England time, we have modern day liability, which is established about 1915 by RCW. This is a statute in 1915 that's RCW 19.48. Basically, this creates two criteria for hotels that they must follow to ensure the safety of valuables for their guests. This ensures that the guest has a reasonable amount of security for their property. The hotel must provide a vault or a safe, and the hotel must provide notice in 3 or more public places, such as offices, elevators, public rooms, or the lobby. And if they meet these two criteria and the guest does not utilize the safe for the safeguarding of their property and things should get stolen or broken, the hotel is not liable to replace anything in any way, shape, or form. Even if the guest were to trust the hotel with protecting their property, and things still got lost or stolen, the hotel is only liable up to $1,000 of that property, provided that they follow those two criteria. So, as Austin Powers would say, what does it all mean? Well, what it all means is that this criteria provides a loophole for hotels. If they provide these two criteria, they are basically legally allowed to absolve themselves of liability for the loss of property for any of their guests. To illuminate that, I'd like to speak more on Walls versus the Cosmopolitan Hotels. This was a court case that happened earlier where Walls was a gentleman who stayed at one of the properties for the Cosmopolitan Hotel Group. He had an almost $3,800 watch that was left in his hotel room. The hotel room was then broken into and the watch was stolen. Walls tried to sue for damages with Cosmopolitan Hotels to get the value of the watch back, and the courts found in favor that because Cosmopolitan Hotels met those two criteria that we talked about earlier, that superseded the loss of property from the guest, even though that there was a clear breach of entry to his hotel room. Now, if you look even further into this court case, you'll know that Walls also learned that the safety of the hotel room was compromised as well, in the form that the door where the handle actually closes to keep the door stably shut and locked had been broken before and was not properly fixed so that its integrity was maintained. This made it far easier for a thief to break in and steal what they wanted. And yet still, because the hotel was able to meet those two criteria, they were not held liable to compensate Walls for the damages of his property being lost. So this is just a further note. What this all means is that as long as the innkeeper takes care of these two criteria, they don't need to replace the property of guests while on their premises if the property is valued over $1,000. Is this okay? Well, from the guest perspective, I would say it's definitely not okay. For myself as a guest, just thinking about this, I have to be very, very careful from now on whenever I take my family on vacations on what we take with us. If we have anything that's valued over $1,000, it's probably going to stay home now. I wouldn't want to lose that property and then have to go through a suit or have to deal with the fact that, thanks to the statutes that have already been put in place, more than likely I would lose the case and not be able to recover any property that I lost that was valued over $1,000, even if I chose to trust the hotel with its safeguard. Now, from a business perspective, this provides a pretty sneaky and easy way for the hotel to not have to pay out big amounts of money, basically, to replace people's stolen property, people's property that was stolen or broken or whatever, damaged in any way while they were a guest in my hotel. This would be good for the bottom line, for a numbers perspective, but for a moral perspective, I'm not sure that if the general populace were educated on that they would be quite so trusting and open to staying at hotels as much as they do. This brings me around to, whether this evolution has become a good thing or a bad thing for the business and for the patrons, the guests of the hotels as well. This brings me to hospitality. What does hospitality mean? Does this new framework fall into hospitality? And is there a moral responsibility in hospitality? Now, for me, I believe that there is a moral responsibility for hospitality, and it goes directly into the meaning. It means to be hospitable, to be accommodating, to be responsible for people that you accept as a guest. It's very common in the hospitality industry that the reason we call people guests is because this is our home and that they are guests in our home. And so if they are guests in our home and we choose to operate in such a manner and to have a culture that would create that level of service for our guests, then we should take that seriously and encompass as well that moral responsibility to the guest, to and to their property, because their property would be an extension of them. It would be something that we are directly responsible for. In closing, these are my sources that I utilized, and you will note at the bottom, I actually looked into the Walls and Cosmopolitan Hotels case. I encourage you to look into it further as well. It's pretty interesting to think about how everything worked out legally and how it was maneuvered and the things that were brought to light.